She stood in the hallway, wedding dress rustling softly around her feet. Through the partially open door, she could see her father, once a towering, invincible firefighter who'd carried children from burning buildings, now frail, sitting in a medical recliner, unaware his daughter was about to give him the gift of walking her down the aisle. A gift that time was cruelly determined to deny them. Kelly drew a deep breath, her hands trembling as they smoothed the vintage lace of her wedding gown. The photographer nodded silently from the shadows. This moment, this precious, heartbreaking moment, would be their last dance. But to understand the weight of what was about to happen, we need to go back to where it all began. Kelly Thompson had always been a daddy's girl. John Thompson, a respected firefighter with the Cedar Grove Fire Department for 30 years, had been her hero long before she understood what heroes were. When Kelly was just 12, her mother walked out of their lives without looking back, and from that moment, it had been just the two of them against the world. John worked extra shifts at the firehouse, ensuring Kelly never felt the financial strain of being raised in a single-parent home. He attended every dance recital, every softball game, every academic award ceremony, sometimes arriving still smelling of smoke, having rushed straight from a call. And every Sunday, without fail, they had breakfast together at Millie's Diner, where they talked about everything and nothing. Those Sunday breakfasts became sacred. As Kelly grew from a girl to a teenager, to a young woman, the tradition remained. Even when she went off to nursing school, inspired by her father's dedication to helping others, she'd drive the 2 hours home every weekend for Sunday breakfast with Dad. It was at one of these breakfasts that she first told him about Michael, the earnest medical student she'd met in the hospital cafeteria during her clinical rotations. John had listened intently, noting the way his daughter's eyes lit up when she talked about this young man. 3 years later, at another Sunday breakfast, Michael joined them, nervously asking John for permission to marry his daughter. John had studied the young man carefully before breaking into a wide smile and extending his hand, saying, "You better take good care of my little girl." That night, at Kelly's apartment, Michael proposed. They set the date for the 15th of October, the beautiful autumn wedding in the mountains where the leaves would be a tapestry of gold and crimson. John immediately began joking about practicing his father-daughter dance moves, promising Kelly he wouldn't embarrass her too much in front of her new in-laws. In the months that followed, Sunday breakfasts often turned into wedding planning sessions. John would listen patiently as Kelly deliberated between flower arrangements or cake flavors, offering his opinion when asked, though he maintained that as long as there was chocolate somewhere on the dessert table, he'd be happy. Life was good. The future was bright. Until the day everything changed with a single phone call. Kelly was changing a young patient's IV bag when her phone vibrated in her pocket. It was unusual for her father to call during her shift. Was always respectful of her work as a pediatric nurse, so she immediately felt a prickle of concern. "Dad, is everything okay?" she asked, stepping into the hallway. There was a pause, just a beat too long. "Hey kiddo, I'm at Cedar Grove Memorial. Think you could swing by after your shift?" Something in his voice made her stomach clench. "Dad, what's going on?" "Just some tests, probably nothing." His voice was too casual, too dismissive. "Doc wants to check a few things out." Kelly knew better. She'd been a nurse for 5 years. She recognized the sound of someone downplaying medical concerns. "I'm coming now." Her supervisor took one look at her face and told her to go. The drive to Cedar Grove Memorial, normally 20 minutes, seemed to take hours. Parking haphazardly, she rushed through the familiar halls of the hospital where she'd done her training, her heart hammering against her ribs. She found him in the imaging department waiting room, still in his favorite flannel shirt and jeans. Looking so normal it momentarily calmed her racing heart. But then he looked up, and his eyes, those steady blue eyes that had always assured her everything would be all right, told her something was very wrong. Dr. Peterson, an oncologist Kelly knew from her rotations, came to speak with them. The words washed over her in waves. Stage 4, lung cancer, metastasized, treatment option, clinical trials, palliative care. But it was the timeline that made the floor drop out from under her. 3 to 6 months, possibly less. "I'm so sorry." Kelly felt her father's large hand cover hers, squeezing gently. Even now, he was comforting her. "It's going to be okay, Kel Bell," he said, using her childhood nickname. For the first time in her adult life, Kelly didn't believe him. The days that followed passed in a blur. John insisted on telling his fire station family himself. Chief Rivera, who'd worked alongside John for 25 years, organized a rotation of firefighters to help with transportation to appointments and household tasks. Kelly moved back into her childhood home, taking leave from the hospital. Michael came every evening after his shifts at the medical center, often bringing dinner and sitting with John, talking about everything from sports to politics to the best way to grill a perfect steak. One evening, 2 weeks after the diagnosis, Kelly found herself sitting at the kitchen table with Michael long after her father had gone to bed, wedding magazines spread out before them, untouched. "We need to talk about October," Michael said gently. Kelly traced the edge of a magazine with her finger, unable to meet his eyes. "I know. What do you think about moving the date up? We could do something small, intimate." "He won't make it." The words came out flat, clinical. Her nurse's mind had been calculating, watching her father's rapid decline. "Even if we got married next month, the treatments are already taking so much out of him. He'd be too weak to walk me down the aisle." Michael reached across the table, taking her hands in his. "Then we bring the wedding to him. We can have the ceremony right here in the living room." Kelly shook her head, tears spilling onto their clasped hands. "That's not what he wants. Dad's been talking about my wedding day since I was little. He wants to see me walk down a real aisle, in a church with flowers and music. He doesn't want his illness to change everything." "Then what do you want to do?" Kelly wiped away her tears, a determination setting in. "I want to keep our October date. I want to plan the wedding exactly as we always imagined, and I want to find a way for Dad to be part of it even if," her voice broke, "even if he's not physically there." Michael pulled her into his arms, holding her while she cried, mourning something that hadn't yet happened but inevitably would. The next morning, Kelly sat beside her father's oncologist as he gently explained that the first round of treatment wasn't producing the results they'd hoped for. While more aggressive options existed, they would severely impact John's quality of life with little promise of extending it substantially. "How long?" Kelly asked, her nurse training allowing her to remain composed while her heart shattered. "At this progression rate, 8 to 10 weeks. "I'm so sorry, Kelly." October was 20 weeks away. When they returned home, Kelly helped her father settle into his favorite recliner while she made tea. Her hands shook as she placed the mug on the side table. "You going to tell me what the doc really said?" John asked, his voice raspy but direct. Kelly sat on the ottoman in front of him. "You heard him, Dad. I heard what he said to both of us. Now I want to hear what he said to the nurse when I went to the bathroom." She should have known better than to try sheltering him from the truth. John Thompson had never been one to hide from reality, no matter how harsh. 8 to 10 weeks, she said quietly. "Maybe less." John nodded, absorbing this information with the same stoic acceptance he'd shown when facing down burning buildings. "So I won't be at the wedding." It wasn't a question. Kelly couldn't speak around the lump in her throat. She simply shook her head, tears spilling silently down her cheeks. "Come here, Kelbell." He opened his arms, and she moved into them, careful not to disturb the port in his chest. As she had so many times as a child, Kelly laid her head on her father's shoulder while he stroked her hair. "I was supposed to walk you down the aisle," he said, his voice tight with emotion. "I've been picturing it since the day the doctor placed you in my arms. This tiny, red-faced, screaming thing that somehow made me feel like the strongest man in the world and the most terrified at the same time." Kelly laughed through her tears, having heard this story many times. "And the father-daughter dance," he continued. "I was going to show off those moves we practiced for your junior prom. You stepped on my feet 3 times, Kelly reminded him, smiling at the memory. "I was breaking in your new shoes for you," he countered, the familiar banter comforting them both. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of what they were losing hanging heavy between them. "Dad?" Kelly finally whispered. "I don't know how to do this without you." John's arms tightened around her. "Yes, you do. You're the strongest person I know, Kelly. Stronger than me. And that's saying something considering I once carried Chief Rivera down 5 flights of stairs when he broke his ankle. That's different." "No, it's not. Strength isn't just physical. It's here." He tapped her forehead. "And here." He placed his hand over her heart. "And you've got both in spades." That night, Kelly couldn't sleep. She sat at her childhood desk, scrolling through old photos on her laptop of her father in his dress uniform at an awards ceremony. The 2 of them at her nursing school graduation. John teaching her to fish at the lake house they rented each summer. A particular photo caught her eye. Kelly at 15, standing beside her father before a school father-daughter dance. She was awkward in her first formal dress, while John looked handsome and slightly uncomfortable in a suit. They were both laughing because seconds before the photo, he'd accidentally stepped on the hem of her dress. Kelly remembered that night clearly how proud she'd felt walking into the school gym with her dad, how patiently he'd taught her to dance despite his own limited skills, how they'd created their signature move, a twirl where he'd dip her dramatically, both of them dissolving into laughter every time. "I'll always be there to dance with you," he'd promised that night, "especially on your wedding day." As dawn broke, Kelly was still awake, a plan forming in her mind. Father couldn't make it to her wedding. Perhaps she could bring at least part of that experience to him. For the next few days, Kelly said nothing about her idea. She focused on caring for her father, administering his medication, preparing his favorite meals even though his appetite was waning, and sitting with him while they watched Old Westernsh's favorite. John's fire station family visited regularly. The younger firefighters treated him with reverence, listening intently as he shared stories from his 30 years of service. They didn't flinch at his increasingly frail appearance or the oxygen tube he now needed occasionally. They still saw their hero, the legendary Captain Thompson, who had once carried 3 children from a collapsing warehouse during the infamous fire of 2001. Kelly loved watching these interactions. Her father came alive during these visits, his eyes regaining their spark as he recounted old calls or teased his former colleagues. For brief moments, it was possible to forget the cancer steadily consuming him from within. One afternoon, after a visit from Chief Rivera and some of the crew, John dozed off in his recliner. Kelly covered him with a blanket and stepped onto the back to call her best friend, Sarah. "I need to talk to you about something," Kelly said after they'd caught up on John's condition. "Anything," Sarah replied. "How can I help?" "I've been thinking about my wedding dress." There was a pause. "Oh, Kelly, are you thinking of postponing the wedding after all?" "No, we're keeping the date, but Dad won't be there." Her voice caught. "He won't see me in my dress. He won't walk me down the aisle. We won't have our dance." "I'm so sorry, Kel. But what if I could give him part of that?" Kelly interrupted, her voice growing stronger as she articulated her idea for the first time. "What if I could find my dress now and wear it for him? Create that moment while we still have time." "A private first look," Sarah said softly. "Kelly, that's beautiful. Is it crazy? Is it too morbid? Or—" "Stop right there," Sarah cut in. "It's perfect. It's loving and thoughtful and exactly what your dad would treasure." Relief washed over Kelly. "Will you come with me to look at dresses? I've been putting it off, hoping somehow." "Of course I will. When do you want to go?" "As soon as possible. I don't want to wait." 2 days later, Sarah picked Kelly up for their appointment at Bella's bridal boutique. Kelly had been hesitant to tell Michael about her plan, not wanting him to feel that their actual wedding day would be diminished somehow. But when she finally explained her idea, he'd immediately supported her. "This isn't just about our wedding anymore," he'd said, holding her close. "It's about giving your dad his moment too." At the boutique, Kelly felt oddly detached as the consultant Elaine led them through the showroom. Wedding dress shopping was supposed to be exciting, a milestone moment with champagne and happy tears. Instead, each gown she considered came with the heavy knowledge that the most important man in her life wouldn't see her wear it on her actual wedding day. After trying on several dresses that felt wrong for various reasons, Elaine brought in one more option. "This just came in yesterday. It's a bit different from what you've been trying, but something tells me it might be right." The dress was vintage-inspired, with delicate cap sleeves and a lace overlay that gave it an ethereal, timeless quality. The moment Kelly slipped it on, something shifted. She stood before the mirror, momentarily breathless. "That's it," Sarah whispered. "Kelly, you look absolutely beautiful." Kelly stared at her reflection, seeing not just herself but echoes of old photographs her grandmother on her wedding day in the 1950s, her mother and father's wedding in the early 1990s. There was history in this dress, a sense of continuity that suddenly felt profoundly important. "My dad will love this," she said softly, running her fingers over the delicate beadwork. Tears filled Elaine's eyes. "Is your father ill? I couldn't help overhearing some of your conversation earlier." Kelly nodded, unable to speak. "My father passed before my wedding too," Elaine said gently. "But we didn't think to do what you're planning. It's a beautiful gift you're giving him." As Kelly changed back into her regular clothes, Elaine approached with a concerned expression. "The alterations will take at least 3 weeks. From what you've said," the unspoken question hung in the air, "would John still be strong enough or even still here in 3 weeks?" "Is there any way to expedite it?" Sarah asked. "It's really important." Elaine hesitated, then nodded decisively. "Let me make a call. I think we can work something out." When Kelly went to pay the deposit, Elaine shook her head. "No deposit necessary, and we'll do the alterations at no extra charge." Before Kelly could protest, she continued, "We take care of our brides. All I ask is that you bring a photo of you and your dad when you come for your fittings." Tears sprang to Kelly's eyes. "Thank you. That means more than you know." On the drive home, Kelly called her wedding photographer, Melissa, explaining her idea and asking if she'd be willing to document this private moment with her father. "I wouldn't miss it," Melissa replied without hesitation. "And I won't charge for this session, Kelly. This is my gift to you and your dad." As the plan came together, Kelly felt a renewed sense of purpose. She couldn't change her father's prognosis, couldn't stop the cancer that was stealing him away day by day. But she could create this one perfect memento memory to carry with her down the aisle in October. That evening, she sat beside John's bed as he took his evening medication, chatting about inconsequential things, a technique she'd developed to distract him from the discomfort of swallowing the many pills that now regulated his days. "Sarah and I went dress shopping today," she said casually, arranging his water glass and pill organizer on the bedside table. John looked up, surprise flickering across his tired face. "Yeah? Find anything?" "Maybe," Kelly smiled, not revealing too much. "It made me think of those stories you used to tell me about you and Mom's wedding." John chuckled, settling back against his pillows. "You mean how the best man lost the rings and your grandfather nearly had a heart attack? And how it rained unexpectedly, so everyone had to crowd under the tent, and Mom's veil got caught on Uncle Joe's wheelchair." "Still the best day of my life," John said softly. "Well, tied with the day you were born." Kelly took her father's hand, noticing how thin it had become, how prominent the veins were beneath his skin. "Tell me again what Mom looked like in her dress." John's eyes grew distant with memory, like something out of a dream. The dress was simply her mother never liked fussy things, but on her, it was magical. She had these tiny pearls sewn into the lace at the neckline. He gestured vaguely toward his collarbone. "And she wore your grandmother's earrings, something borrowed and something blue in one." "You remember all those details after almost 30 years? Some moments get etched into your soul, Kel Bell. You'll understand when you see Michael waiting for you at the end of that aisle." A lump formed in Kelly's throat. He wouldn't be there to see that moment. She squeezed his hand. "I love you, Dad." "Love you too, kiddo. More than you'll ever know." That night, Kelly finalized her plan. She would need Helfer's stepmother, Carol, who had married John when Kelly was in college, the hospice nurse who now visited daily, Michael to help with logistics, and Sarah to help her prepare. Like a military operation, the surprise would require precise timing and coordination. The dress shop had promised to have the gown ready in 10 days, an almost impossible timeline that they were making happen through sheer goodwill. The alterations would be minimal since there wasn't time for anything elaborate. Kelly also needed to consider her father's increasingly unpredictable energy levels. Some days he was alert and relatively comfortable. Others he was consumed by fatigue and pain that even the strongest medications couldn't fully mask. The surprise would need to be flexible, ready to be implemented when John was having a good day. Carol became her chief co-conspirator, keeping track of John's better hours and which days seemed to bring more strength. "Wednesday mornings seem to be good for him," she noted, "after he's had his night medication and before the afternoon fatigue sets in." The hospice nurse, Diane, offered to help ensure John was comfortable on the chosen day. "I can adjust his medication schedule slightly to maximize his comfort without making him too drowsy." Meanwhile, Kelly scheduled her hair and makeup trial for the morning of the planned reveal, arranged for Melissa to be on standby with her camera, and asked Michael to be ready to help her with the dress but to stay outside during the actual father-daughter moment. "This should be just between you two," he said, supporting her decision. As the day approached, Kelly found herself oscillating between excitement and grief. Each preparation was a step toward creating a beautiful memory, but also an acknowledgement that this substitute moment was necessary, because her father wouldn't be present for the real one. One evening, as she sat making lists of everything that needed to happen, Michael found her crying silently at the kitchen table. "What if it's too much for him?" she whispered as he knelt beside her chair. "What if seeing me in the dress makes everything harder? What if it just emphasizes everything he's going to miss?" Michael took her hands in his. "Kelly, think about who your dad is. Has he ever shied away from emotional moments? Has he ever chosen the easier path just to avoid pain?" Kelly shook her head, thinking of the man who ran into burning buildings when others were running out, who raised a daughter alone rather than taking the easier route of letting relatives help, who faced his terminal diagnosis with clear-eyed courage. "He would want this moment," Michael continued, "even with the bittersweetness, especially with the bittersweetness." Kelly nodded, drawing strength from Michael's certainty. "You're right. This is who we are. We face things head-on, together." As the day of the dress reveal approached, Kelly felt a calm determination replace her anxiety. Whatever happened, she was giving her father a glimpse of a future moment he had dreamed of for decades. It wouldn't replace the real thing, but it would be its own kind of perfect. The morning of the dress reveal dawned clear and milled, a perfect late spring day with sunshine streaming through the trees around John's house. Kelly had spent the night at her apartment for the first time in weeks, leaving her father in Carol's capable care to preserve the surprise. She woke early, too nervous to sleep past dawn. Michael brought coffee and sat with her on the balcony as she went through her mental checklist one final time. "The photographer will meet us at the salon at 9, she said. "Hair and makeup should take about 2 hours. Then we'll go to the bridal shop for the dress. Elaine is opening early for us." You'll follow in your car so you can help me get the dress to Dad's house without wrinkling it." Michael took her hand, interrupting the flow of logistics. "Hey, take a breath. Everything is arranged. Today is going to be beautiful." Kelly exhaled slowly, trying to release some of the tension in her shoulders. "I'm just worried about Dad. What if this is too much? What if he's having a bad day? What if—" Carol texted while you were in the shower. "He had a good night and ate half a piece of toast for breakfast. Diane is there now and says his vitals are stable. Everyone is watching out for him, making sure he's comfortable for today." Relief washed over Kelly. "I should get going. I don't want to be late." "One more thing," Michael said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small velvet pouch and handed it to her. "I thought you might want to wear these today." Inside the pouch was a pair of pearl earring, simple, elegant drops that caught the morning light. "They were my grandmother's," Michael explained. "I know we've talked about you wearing them at the wedding as your something borrowed, but I thought maybe you'd like to wear them today too for your dad." Tears filled Kelly's eyes as she leaned forward to kiss him. "They're perfect. Thank you for understanding how important this is." "He's going to be my father too," Michael said simply. "I want these memories as much as you do." At the salon, Kelly's regular stylist had cleared her morning schedule to accommodate the special appointment. Melissa, the photographer, arrived as promised, her camera already capturing behind-the-scenes moments as Kelly's hair was arranged in a soft updo with a few tendrils framing her face. "Nothing too formal," Kelly had requested. "I want to look like myself, just a more special occasion version." The makeup artist applied a natural look that enhanced Kelly's features without being too dramatic. "We need this to be tear-proof," she said with a knowing smile, adding extra setting spray. "And believe me, there will be tears." As Kelly sat under the dryer, Melissa showed her some of the candid shots she'd already taken Kelly sipping coffee while getting her hair done. Laughing with the stylist, a close-up of her hands nervously twisting in her lap. "These are beautiful," Kelly said. "Thank you for doing this." "Thank you for letting me be part of it," Melissa replied. "These kinds of moments are why I became a photographer." From the salon, they drove to Bella's bridal boutique where Elaine was waiting, the shop otherwise empty and peaceful. The dress hung on a display in the private dressing area, looking even more beautiful than Kelly remembered. "We finished the alterations yesterday," Elaine said, helping Kelly step into the gown. "I think you'll find it fits perfectly now." Indeed, the dress seemed made for her. The vintage lace lay against her skin like it had always belonged there, the silhouette accentuating her figure without being too revealing. The cap sleeve sat perfectly on her shoulders, and the subtle train added just enough drama without being impractical. "Oh, Kelly," Sarah gasped, having arrived just in time to see the final result. "You're absolutely stunning." Kelly turned slowly before the three-way mirror, barely recognizing herself. With her hair styled and wearing Michael's grandmother's earrings, she looked both timeless and completely present a bride honoring traditions while creating her own. "What do you think your dad will say?" Sarah asked softly. Kelly smiled, blinking back tears. "He'll probably make some joke about how I clean up nice, and then he'll get all choked up and try to hide it." Elaine helped Kelly change back into her regular clothes, then carefully packed the dress into a garment bag. "I've included some emergency supplies," she said, handing Kelly a small kit. "Double-sided tape, a few extra pearls in case any come loose, and a stain remover pen just in case." In the parking lot, Michael was waiting as promised. He helped arrange the dress in his car so it wouldn't wrinkle on the journey to John's house. Kelly hugged Sarah goodbye, promising to call later with a full report. "I'll be thinking about you guys," Sarah said. "This is going to be a day he'll never forget." The drive to her father's house felt surreal. Kelly watched the familiar neighborhoods pass by, trying to stay present despite the butterflies in her stomach. Michael drove carefully, glancing over occasionally to check on her. "Second thoughts?" he asked when she'd been quiet for several minutes. Kelly shook her head. "Just trying to prepare myself, to be fully there with him, whatever happens." They pulled up to John's modest two-story home, the house where Kelly had grown up, where her height had been marked on the kitchen doorframe in pencil, where she'd learned to ride a bike in the driveway, and where her father had taught her to dance in the living room. Carol met them at the side door, her face alight with excitement. "Perfect timing," she whispered. "Diane just left, and he's having a really good morning. He's in the living room, looking out at the garden. I told him I'm expecting a delivery so he won't be surprised by the doorbell." "How does he seem?" Kelly asked, suddenly nervous, bright-eyed and chatting up a storm. "He even asked for coffee instead of tea this morning." Carol squeezed Kelly's hand. "It's a good day, Kelly. One of his best this week." Relief flooded through her. "Thank you for helping make this happen," she said, embracing her stepmother. Carol's eyes were damp as she pulled away. "I love him too, you know, and he's so proud of you, talks about you constantly. This will mean everything to him." Michael carried the dress inside and helped set up a makeshift dressing area in the downstairs guest room. Melissa slipped in quietly, her camera already documenting these preparatory moments. "I'll wait outside," Michael said after helping Kelly with the zipper. "This is your moment with him." Kelly nodded, too emotional for words. She checked her reflection one last time in the guest room mirror, took a deep breath, and stepped into the hallway. Carol was waiting there, her hands clasped over her mouth when she saw Kelly in the dress. "Oh my goodness," she whispered. "You're breathtaking." "Is he ready?" Kelly asked. Carol nodded. "He's sitting in his recliner facing the window. He has no idea what's coming." She reached out to squeeze Kelly's hands more. "I'll be in the kitchen if you need anything." Kelly stood in the hallway leading to the living room, gathering her courage. Melissa positioned herself discreetly in the corner, camera ready but unobtrusive. The house was quiet except for the distant sound of birds in the garden and the soft hum of the oxygen machine that had become the soundtrack of their lives. She took one final deep breath and stepped forward. Kelly paused at the threshold of the living room, taking in the scene before her. The morning sunlight streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow over the familiar space. Her father sat in his medical recliner, positioned to look out at the garden he'd tended so carefully for decades but could no longer maintain. He was wearing a button-down shirtless concession to Carol's mysterious visitor explanation, but still had on the comfortable lounge pants that had become his daily uniform since the illness made formal clothing too cumbersome. Even from behind, Kelly could see how much the disease had diminished him physically. His once broad shoulders now looked narrow, his neck thin, his head bearing the nearly imperceptible tremor that had developed in recent weeks. Yet there was still dignity in his posture, still strength in the hands that rested on the chair's arms. The floorboard beneath Kelly's foot creaked slightly, the same board that had betrayed her countless times when she'd tried sneaking in past curfew as a teenager. John turned his head slightly, not enough to see her fully. "Carol, is that the delivery?" he called, his voice raspy but strong. Kelly's heart hammered in her chest. This was it. "No, Dad, it's me." John began turning his chair, a confused smile on his face. "Kelly? I thought you weren't coming until—" The words died on his lips as he completed the turn and saw her standing there in her wedding dress. His hand flew to his mouth, his eyes widening in astonishment. Time seemed to stop as father and daughter looked at each other across the sunlit room. Kelly saw a kaleidoscope of emotions cross her father's face of surprise, confusion, realization, and finally, a profound joy that transformed his tired features. "Kelly," he whispered, his voice breaking, "my beautiful girl." She took a tentative step forward, suddenly shy despite all her planning. "I wanted you to see me, Dad, as a bride." John's eyes filled with tears, one escaping to track down his weathered cheek. "Come here," he said, holding out his hands. "Let me look at you properly." Kelly moved toward him, the dress rustling softly around her feet. She did a small twirl as she approached, letting him see the full effect. "You look just like your mother on our wedding day," John said, his voice thick with emotion. "The same grace, the same light in your eyes." Kelly knelt beside his chair, careful of her dress, and placed her hands in his outstretched ones. His fingers trembled slightly as they closed around hers, but his grip was still strong. The hands that had carried her when she was tired, bandaged her scraped knees, and taught her to throw a perfect spiral. "Is that okay?" she asked softly. "That I look like Mom?" John smiled, reaching up to touch her cheek. "It's perfect. She'd be so proud of the woman you've become. Not a day goes by that I don't wish she could see you now." He paused, swallowing hard. "Though I guess we'll both be watching you from somewhere else when October comes." Kelly felt tears threatening but held them back. She hadn't come here to cry, but to celebrate. "I found the dress last week. I wanted you first to see me in it." "It's beautiful, Kelbell. You're beautiful." His eyes roamed her face, seeming to memorize every detail. "Michael's one lucky man. I'm the lucky one," Kelly said, thinking of her fiancé waiting patiently outside, supporting this moment without inserting himself into it. "He helped me plan this surprise. Smart man. Already knows the most important rule of marriage: make your wife happy." John winked, some of his old humor shining through the emotion of the moment. Kelly laughed, relieved to see this glimpse of her father's personality despite everything the illness had taken. "He's outside, actually. I wanted this moment to be just for us, but he helped with the dress." John nodded approvingly. "I want to thank him before you leave." He looked at her again, taking in the earrings, the hairstyle, the subtle makeup. "You didn't just throw this together, did you? You went all out." "Well, I had help. Sarah, the dress shop owner, my stylist. Even Melissa's here. She's our wedding photographer. She's taking some pictures, if that's okay." John glanced toward the corner where Melissa stood discreetly, offering a small wave. "More than okay. I'm glad someone's documenting this because I'm not sure my old brain will believe it actually happened. He looked back at Kelly, his expression growing more serious. Thank you for this, Kelly. I've been trying not to think about all the things I'll miss. Your wedding day has been the hardest to accept. I know, Dad. That's why I wanted to give you a piece of that day, just for us. John straightened in his chair, a determined look crossing his face. Well, if this is my one chance to see my daughter as a bride, we're going to do it right. He turned toward the hallway. Carol, can you come in here, please? Carol appeared almost immediately, her eyes red-rimmed but smiling. Yes, John, I need that old CD player from the bedroom, and the blue CD case from my dresser, and possibly some help getting to my feet. Kelly looked at him in confusion. Dad, what are you doing? You don't need to stand. Oh yes, I do, he said with the same stubborn determination that had defined him all his life. If this is my only chance to dance with my daughter in her wedding dress, I'm taking it. Carol returned quickly with the portable CD player and the blue leather case that had lived on John's dresser for as long as Kelly could remember. She set them on the side table, then moved to help John. Are you sure about this? She asked gently. You don't have to push yourself. John gave her a look that brooked no argument. I've been saving my strength for something important. I just didn't know what until now. Kelly watched anxiously as Carol and John worked together to bring him to his feet. It was a careful, practiced movement evidence of the many times they'd done this in recent weeks. Once standing, John reached for his walking cane, steadying himself with visible determination. Dad, please don't overdo it, Kelly said, hovering nearby in case he needed support. I won't break Kel Bell, he assured her, though his breathing was already more labored from the exertion. Now, let's see if I remember how this thing works. He fumbled with the CD player, his fingers less nimble than they once were. Carol stepped in to help, opening the case to reveal dozens of CDs, each labeled in John's neat handwriting. Which one? She asked. Kelly's songs. John replied without hesitation. It should be right in front. Sure enough, there was a CD marked exactly that. Carol inserted it into the player and handed the remote to John, who held it with a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Did you know I've had this CD for almost 15 years? He asked Kelly. Ever since your junior prom. I put together all the songs we ever danced to, thinking someday I'd use it again for your wedding. Kelly's heart clenched with emotion. All these years, he'd been preserving these memories, planning for a future moment he wouldn't live to see. John pressed play, and the gentle opening notes of Unforgettable by Nat King Cole filled the room. The significance wasn't lost on Kelly. It had been their song since she was a little girl, standing on her father's feet as they danced around the kitchen. May I have this dance? John asked formally, extending his hand with a slight bow that momentarily transformed him from an ill man to the strong father of her childhood. Kelly placed her hand in his, stepping carefully into his space. I'd be honored. They began to sway gently, more of a shifting weight from foot to foot than actual dancing. Kelly was acutely aware of her father's frailty, how she needed to support him subtly without making it obvious, how his breathing grew more labored with even this minimal exertion. Yet there was joy in his eyes that transcended the physical limitations, a happiness that seemed to infuse him with borrowed strength. Remember when I taught you to dance for your first school formal? John asked, his voice low and intimate. You were so worried about looking silly. Kelly smiled at the memory. You made me practice every night for a week. Mom thought we were both crazy. She was just jealous of my smooth moves. John joked, attempting a small step that nearly unbalanced him. Kelly steadied him discreetly, and they resumed their gentle swaying. As Nat King Cole sang about someone unforgettable, Kelly looked around the living room where so many of her childhood memories had been formed. The bookshelf still held her school photos and sports trophies alongside her father's firefighting awards. The mantel displayed the collection of snow globes they'd gotten on various family trips. The worn rug beneath their feet had witnessed countless Christmas mornings, movie nights, and yes, impromptu dance lessons. It struck her with sudden clarity that this would be her last dance with her father in this house, their house with all its history embedded in every corner. What are you thinking about? John asked, noticing her expression. Just how lucky I've been, Kelly replied honestly, to have you as my dad, to grow up in this house with all this love. John's eyes grew misty. I'm the lucky one, kiddo. Being your father has been the greatest privilege of my life. They continued swaying as the song played on, both aware of the bittersweet significance of the moment. Kelly could feel her father tiring, his weight leaning more heavily against her, but his expression remained determined. As the music approached its final chorus, John straightened slightly. Ready for our big finish? He asked with a wink. Kelly hesitated, concerned about his stability. Dad, you don't have to. Of course I do. Can't break tradition now. Before she could protest further, John mustered his strength for their signature move, the twirl and dip, that had been part of their dance repertoire since Kelly was a teenager. It was a shadow of its former self, the twirl more of a gentle turn, the dip barely a lean, but the intention was unmistakable. Kelly laughed in surprise, the sound turning watery as emotion caught in her throat. Her father's face lit up at the sound, his own chuckle joining hers as they completed the move. The song ended, leaving them standing in the center of the living room, still holding on to each other. John's breathing was labored now, his face pale from the exertion, but his eyes were bright with accomplishment. "I think I need to sit down now," he admitted finally. Kelly and Carol helped him back to his recliner, adjusting the oxygen tube he'd removed for the dance. Once settled, he reached for Kelly's hand, drawing her to sit on the ottoman beside him. "Thank you," he said simply, "for giving me that dance." "Thank you for teaching me how," Kelly replied, wiping a tear from her cheek. John looked up, suddenly remembering Melissa in the corner. "Did you get that?" he called to her. "The dip especially, that's my signature move." Melissa smiled, nodding. "Got it all, Mr. Thompson, it was beautiful." "Good." John sat back, visibly tired but satisfied. "I want Kelly to have those pictures. For the wedding." The mention of the wedding created a momentary shadow, the reminder of what John would miss hanging briefly in the air between them. But then he squeezed Kelly's hand, his expression turning thoughtful. "I have something for you," he said. "Carol, can you bring me the box from my nightstand? The small wooden one." While they waited for Carol to return, John studied Kelly in her dress. "You know, your mother would have been much better at all this wedding stuff. She always had an eye for beauty. It's where you get your taste from. Certainly not from me," Mr. Fashion challenged. Kelly laughed. "I don't know about that. You always looked pretty in your dress uniform." "That's because the department told me exactly what to wear and when to wear it," John countered with a grin. "Left to my own devices, I'd have worn flannel to work every day." Carol returned with a small polished wooden box that Kelly recognized as one of her father's prized possessions, a handcrafted container given to him by a furniture maker he'd once saved from a workshop fire. John took it, his hands steady as he opened the lid. Inside, nestled on a velvet lining, was his wedding ring, a simple gold band that he'd worn for 10 years of marriage and continued wearing for years after Kelly's mother left, only removing it when he finally found happiness again with Carol. "I want you to give this to Michael," John said, lifting the ring carefully, "on your wedding day." Kelly shook her head in confusion. "Dad, I don't understand. This ring saw me through the best and hardest days of my life. It was there when we brought you home from the hospital. It was there through the sleepless nights and first steps and skinned knees." He paused, his voice growing thick. "It was there when your mother left, and I had to figure out how to be both parents to you." He held the ring out to her. "It reminds me that love isn't just the easy days. It's showing up on the hard ones too. Tell Michael it comes with a responsibility to love you completely, on sunny days and stormy ones." Kelly took the ring, closing her fingers around it tightly. "I'll give it to him, Dad. I promise." John nodded, satisfied. Then, as if remembering something else, he reached back into the box and removed a sealed envelope. "And this is for you, to open on your wedding day." Kelly accepted the envelope, noting her name written in her father's distinctive handwriting across the front. "What is it?" "Just some thoughts. Things I would have said in my the bride's speech." He smiled ruefully. "I've been working on it a little each day. It's my way of walking you down the aisle." Kelly held the envelope carefully, understanding the precious gift it represented. Her father's voice preserved for a day when he would be physically absent. "There's one more thing," John said, his expression growing serious. "A promise I need from you." "Anything," Kelly replied without hesitation. "Don't let grief overshadow your wedding day." His gaze was intense, his voice firm despite its weakness. "I want you to laugh and dance and celebrate. I want you to be fully present with Michael and your guests. I'll be there in my own way, but I need to know you'll let yourself be happy." Kelly started to protest, but John held up his hand. "I mean it, Kelly. The greatest gift you can give me is knowing that you're living your life fully, even when I'm not there to see it." There was a wisdom in his eyes that transcended his 58 years, the understanding of someone who had stared mortality in the face and made peace with it. "I promise," Kelly whispered, knowing how important this was to him. As if satisfied that the serious business was concluded, John's expression lightened. "Now, tell me about the wedding plans. I want to hear everything." For the next hour they sat together while Kelly described the venue, the flowers, the menu for the reception. She showed him photos on her phone, laughing as he offered comically bad suggestions for the cake design and first dance song. "Please tell me you're not seriously considering the chicken dance," he teased after she rejected his third inappropriate song choice. "Only if the entire fire department performs it in full gear," she countered, falling into their familiar pattern of banter. John's energy was clearly waning, but he fought against the fatigue, determined to stretch this precious time together. Finally, though, he couldn't suppress a yawn that turned into a small coughing fit. "I think that's my cue," Kelly said, standing reluctantly. "You need rest, and I should get out of this dress before something happens to it." John nodded, his eyelids growing heavy despite his efforts. "Will you come back tomorrow? Bring Michael for dinner?" "Of course," Kelly promised, leaning down to kiss his forehead. "Nothing could keep me away." Carol helped Kelly back to the guest room where Michael was waiting. His eyes widened appreciatively when he saw her in the dress, but he said nothing, simply helped her out of it and carefully packed it back into its garment bag. Only when Kelly had changed back into her regular clothes did he ask, "How was it?" Kelly looked at him, this man who understood her enough to give her this precious day with her father, who waited patiently while she shared something he couldn't be part of. "It was perfect," she said simply. "He danced with me." Michael's eyes widened in surprise. "He stood up?" he insisted. "We danced to Unforgettable. He even did our signature dip, though it was more of a lean." Michael smiled, pulling her into a gentle embrace. "I'm so glad you had that moment." "He wants to see you before we leave," Kelly said, pulling back. "He has something to tell you." They found John dozing in his recliner, the fatigue finally overtaking his determination. Carol sat nearby, watching over him with a tender expression that spoke volumes about their own love story. "He's worn out," she said softly as they entered, "but it was worth it. I haven't seen him this happy in weeks." At the sound of their voices, John stirred, his eyes opening slowly. When he saw Michael, he smiled. "There he is. The man brave enough to take on a Thompson woman." Michael approached, kneeling beside the recliner much as Kelly had done earlier. "It's the best decision I ever made, sir." "Come to check on your future father-in-law?" "I'm still kicking." John's voice was weak, but his humor intact. "Actually, I came to thank you," Michael said, "for raising the most amazing woman I've ever known, and for trusting me to take care of her." John's expression grew serious. "You'll take care of each other. That's how it works." He reached out, placing his hand on Michael's shoulder. "Kelly will tell you about the ring. It's important." "I understand, sir. It will be an honor." John nodded, satisfied. Then, with a glint of his old mischief, he added, "And if you ever hurt her, remember I have an entire fire station of brothers who know how to make accidents natural." Michael laughed as he was meant to. "I never doubted it for a second." As they prepared to leave, Kelly lingered by her father's side, reluctant to end this perfect day. "I'll see you tomorrow, Dad." "I'll be right here," John assured her, his eyelids already drooping with exhaustion. "Dreaming about my beautiful girl in her wedding dress." The days following the wedding dress visit took on a bittersweet quality. John seemed both energized by the experience and more accepting of his limited time. He spoke more openly about his wishes for after he was gone, making arrangements with a clarity and peace that both comforted and devastated Kelly. A week after their dance, Melissa delivered the photographs. The entire family gathered in John's living room. Kelly and Michael, Carol, and even John's brother William, who had flown in from Arizona. They passed the leather-bound album from person to person, each image capturing the raw emotion and beauty of that day. There was Kelly's first appearance in the doorway, John's expression of awe perfectly preserved. The careful dance, both supporting each other in different ways. The laughter during their attempted dip. Quiet moments of conversation afterward, heads bent together over wedding plans. John ran his fingers over a particular photograph, the one that captured them mid-dance, Kelly's dress flowing around them. His face lifted in a smile despite the obvious effort the movement cost him. "I want this one by my bed," he said decisively, "to remind me what I'm holding on for." 2 days later, several members of John's old fire station arrived in their dress uniforms, having heard about the special day from Carol. They came to pay respects to their former captain and to be part of his daughter's journey. Chief Rivera, now gray but still commanding, embraced Kelly warmly. "Your father was the best of us," he said. "The bravest man I ever knew, not just in fires but in life." The firefighters requested a photo with the chief's daughter in her wedding dress. Though initially hesitant to put the dress on again so soon, Kelly agreed when she saw how much it meant to these men who had been like uncles to her growing up. Melissa returned to capture the moment. Kelly in her gown surrounded by 7 firefighters in full dress uniform, her father seated in the center in his old captain's hat. Despite the oxygen tube and his diminished frame, John sat tall and proud, every inch the respected leader he had always been. As June turned to July, John's condition declined more rapidly. The good days became fewer, the pain more difficult to manage. Kelly took extended leave from her nursing job, spending nearly every day at her father's bedside, reading to him, watching old westerns, or simply sitting in companionable silence when conversation became too taxing. Michael came each evening after his hospital shifts, sometimes bringing dinner for everyone, other times simply sitting with John while Kelly took a much-needed break. Their easy rapport had deepened since the wedding dress day, a bond forming between the two most important men in Kelly's life. One evening in mid-July, Kelly found Michael and her father deep in conversation when she returned from a quick grocery run. They fell silent when she entered, exchanging a look she couldn't quite interpret. "What are you two plotting?" she asked lightly, setting down the bags. "Just man talk," John replied with a wink. "Wedding stuff." Later, Michael explained. "He was telling me how he wants to be included in the ceremony. He has some ideas." Kelly listened as Michael described John's wishes: an empty chair in the front row with his fire helmet and a single rose, photos from their dress day projected during what would have been their father-daughter dance, his firefighter brothers forming an honor guard at the beginning of the ceremony. "He's thought of everything," Kelly said, tears forming. "He's still trying to take care of me, even now." "He always will," Michael replied simply. "That's what fathers do." As July waned, so did John's strength. He began sleeping more, eating less, the pain medications keeping him comfortable but increasingly disconnected. Kelly treasured the lucid moments when they came, storing up her father's words like precious gems. During one such moment, as they sat together watching the sunset through his bedroom window, John turned to her with unexpected clarity. "I can see it all, you know," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Your wedding day. It's beautiful, Kelly." She took his hand, thin and cool in hers. "Tell me what you see." He smiled, his eyes distant as if viewing a scene only he could access. "The church filled with flowers. You walking down the aisle, head held high like I taught you. Michael's face when he first sees you, like he can't believe his luck." He paused, his breathing labored but his words deliberate. "I see an empty chair where I should be sitting, but it's not really empty. And during the reception, during what would be our dance, everyone watches those pictures of us while a candle burns for me." Kelly couldn't speak around the lump in her throat. It was exactly what they had planned. "It's enough," John continued, squeezing her hand with what little strength remained. "To have had our moment here, in this house where we made so many memories. To know you'll carry me with you." 2 days later, in the quiet pre-dawn hours, John Thompson passed peacefully in his sleep, Carol holding one hand and Kelly the other. As promised, the fire department provided a hero's escort for his final journey. Fire trucks from 3 counties lining the route to the cemetery, their lights flashing in silent tribute. At the funeral, Kelly stood supported by Michael and surrounded by a sea of blue uniforms, her father's brothers in service coming to honor one of their own. Chief Rivera delivered a eulogy that captured John's courage, dedication, and unwavering love for his daughter. John Thompson ran into burning buildings to save strangers, Rivera said, his voice thick with emotion. But his greatest act of bravery was raising his daughter alone, giving her everything he had, including his final moments. That's the measure of the man we've lost. In the days that followed, as Kelly sorted through her father's belongings, she discovered a second letter hidden in his desk drawer, separate from the one he'd given her for the wedding day. This one was marked simply, "After." Inside, she found not just a letter but detailed instructions for how he wished to be incorporated into her wedding ceremony. He'd thought of everything, from the music to play during the photo presentation to the specific beer his firefighter brothers should toast him with at the reception. The final paragraph made her both laugh and cry. "Save me some wedding cake in the freezer. You never know what kind of pull I might have on the other side. I've always wanted to try haunting, and cake seems like a good enough reason to start." When the 15th of October finally arrived, Kelly woke with a complex mix of emotions: joy for the day ahead, grief for her father's absence, gratitude for the special moments they'd managed to create before he was gone. As she prepared with her bridesmaids, she felt a strange calm. The wedding was unfolding exactly as planned, exactly as her father had seen it in his mind's eye during those final days. Before the ceremony, Kelly took a moment alone in the church's small side room, carefully opening the envelope her father had given her months before. Inside was a letter written in his distinctive handwriting, already familiar from the countless notes he'd left in her lunchboxes throughout childhood. "My dearest Kelly," it began. "If you're reading this, it's your wedding day, and I'm watching from somewhere better than the front row." The letter continued for 3 pages, funny anecdotes from her childhood, wisdom about marriage gleaned from his own experiences, and his overwhelming pride in the woman she had become. It was, as he'd promised, his father of the bride's speech, preserved for her to read when he couldn't be there to deliver it. The final paragraph brought fresh tears to her eyes. "When you walk down that aisle today, hold your head high like I taught you. Know that I'm walking beside you in spirit, probably stepping on your dress train because I never did get the hang of that part. And when it's time for our dance, look at those pictures and remember, we already had our perfect moment in our living room with unforgettable playing. That dance will carry me through eternity. I love you, Kel Bell. Always have, always will, Dad. Kelly carefully folded the letter and placed it in the locket she wore around her neck, a wedding gift from Carol that contained a small photo from their wedding dress dance. When it came time to walk down the aisle, Kelly asked Chief Rivera to escort her. As they stood at the back of the church, Rivera leaned down and whispered, "He's here, you know, probably fussing about his tie and telling me not to step on your dress." Kelly laughed through her tears, the exact response her father would have wanted. The ceremony was everything they had planned, beautiful, meaningful, and infused with John's presence despite his absence. The empty chair in the front row held his fire helmet and a single white rose. During the vows, Kelly and Michael lit a candle in John's memory before exchanging their promises, and when Michael slipped the wedding band onto Kelly's finger, it was accompanied by her father's gold ring, which he now wore on his right hand, a physical reminder of the responsibility he had accepted. At the reception, during what would have been the father-daughter dance, the lights dimmed and photos from Kelly and John's wedding dress day appeared on a large screen. Their dance to Unforgettable played while the images transitioned from one to another, John's face seeing Kelly for the first time, their careful dance, the attempted dip, their laughter, the tender moments that followed. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. When the last photo faded, the image of John in his recliner, smiling peacefully as he watched his daughter in her wedding dress, Kelly felt Michael's hand slip into hers. "He's here," Michael whispered. "I can feel it." "I know," Kelly replied. He wouldn't miss it. Later, during a quiet moment at the reception, Kelly stepped away from the celebration to visit the memorial table where the photos from their special day were displayed. She touched the frame containing the image John had requested by his bedside, the one of them dancing, her dress flowing around them, his face alight with joy despite his evident frailty. "We did it, Dad," she whispered, "just like you saw it." As she rejoined the reception, Kelly found herself approached by countless guests who had been moved by the wedding dress story and the photos they'd witnessed. More than a few remarked that they planned to create similar memories with their own loved ones, not waiting for someday but seizing the present moment. That night, as Kelly and Michael shared their first dance as husband and wife, she felt a profound sense of completion. The day had been perfect, filled with joy, celebration, and her father's spirit exactly as he had wanted. And when Michael twirled her gently before dipping her in a move reminiscent of her dance with John, Kelly laughed with genuine delight, hearing in her mind her father's voice. "That's it, kiddo. That's what I've been holding on for." In the years that followed, the story of Kelly's wedding dress visit to her father became something of a legend in their community, a testament to the power of love that transcends even death's boundaries. The photographs Melissa had taken that day were eventually published in a book about meaningful end-of-life moments, inspiring countless other families to create their own sacred memories while time remained. And true to her promise, Kelly did save a piece of wedding cake in the freezer. Though no ghostly visitors ever came to claim it, the gesture itself was a perfect embodiment of who John Thompson had been, a man who faced life's darkest moments with humor, grace, and an unwavering love for his daughter. Life's most precious moments often come in unexpected packages. Kelly and John's story reminds us that we don't always get the perfect circumstances we imagine, but we can still create perfect memories within the circumstances we're given. Is there someone in your life who deserves a special moment? Someone who might not be there for a future milestone? I'd like to invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please consider sharing it with someone who might need a reminder not to wait for someday to create meaningful moments with their loved ones. Sometimes tomorrow isn't guaranteed, but today is a gift we can unwrap together. Every the 15th of October, on her wedding anniversary, she and Michael take fresh flowers to John's grave, and every Father's Day, she visits the local fire station with homemade cookies, continuing a tradition her father started decades ago. When her first child was born, a son named John Michael Kelly brought him home in a onesie embroidered with her father's fire station number. And as he grows, she tells him stories about the grandfather who loved so deeply and lived so fully that his legacy continues to inspire not just his family, but countless others who have heard the story of a father and daughter's last dance. In the end, perhaps that's the most beautiful wedding gift John could have given his daughter, not just memories of their time together, but a template for how to live, with courage, with humor, with purpose, and above all, with love that transcends even our final moments. Thank you for joining us for this story. Until next time, remember to treasure the moments you have With those you love, they truly are unforgettable.